Hello, everybody, and welcome to this evening's event. I'm Jeanette Bruce. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the program coordinator at Whistler Public Library, and I'm delighted to be here with this group of people tonight. You're going to meet them in a second. I just have a little bit of housekeeping to share with you. Uh, First of all, I'd like to open the event by expressing my gratitude that we're able to gather on the shared traditional unceded territories of the Squamish Nation and the Lilwat Nation. We are very lucky to live, work, play, learn, read the news on these territories. I am always curious where people are watching from, so whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook, hi, hello, please feel free to comment and let us know where you're joining from. This is a very sea to sky specific discussion, I think. But hey, maybe you're elsewhere, or maybe you're in Vancouver. Anyways, please let us know. We're always curious to find out. So before I introduce our guest tonight, I do want to plug two events since I have this captive audience tonight. The first is coming up next Thursday at 7 p.m. The Whistler Museum is hosting an event called the Journalism in Whistler, and it's part of their virtual speaker series. And one of our guests here tonight, one of our esteemed guests, Claire Ogilvie, is one of the speakers for next week's event as well. And I'm not going to lie to you people, Brad and I found out about these two events and said to each other, did we just plan the same event? But no, no, we did not. The museum's event is more of a retrospective, looking back on the history of journalism in Whistler, and it's featuring Paul Burrows, who was one of the founders of the Whistler Question, Charlie Doyle, who was a co-founder of the Whistler Answer, Bob Barnett, who was a Pique co-founder, and of course Claire, who is the current Pique editor. So for more information on that event, you can go to whistlermuseum.org/events to register. And the other event that I am going to plug is a library event, and this is actually hot off the presses. Is that, am I using that right? You folks here are the first to hear about this event. And I'm gonna use a cuss word now, but I'm allowed because it's in the name of the event. This event is going to be called No Shit, as in KNOW, Information and Media Literacy. And so it's going to overlap with what we're talking about tonight, but it's going to be from the library perspective. And specifically, we're going to talk to two librarians. Chelsea Jordan Makeley, who used to be our technology and support services librarian here in Whistler, she's now the executive director of a library in Coleraine, Massachusetts. And we're also going to talk to Rachel Bergquist, who is the public services librarian in Squamish Public Library. So that event is on April 12th at noon. It will be recorded in case you're not available for a lunch hour engagement. And you'll be able to find more information about that on the library's website any day now. I think I should be sharing all the details tomorrow. Okay, that's enough talking from me. As you can see, I have 5 guests with me tonight, and this is the Pique Newsmagazine's editorial team, and we have got quite the discussion planned for you this evening. But first, we are going to put some names, some faces. We're going to put those things together. You might know these people by their bylines only, but we want to meet them for real tonight. So let's do a round of introductions. Claire, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name's Claire Ogilvie, and I am the editor of Pique. This is my 11th year as editor, which actually stuns me. I still feel like I just started. Before I became editor, I was a reporter with the Pique part-time while I worked full-time with the province newspaper. And I've been a reporter for decades now, over probably close to 30 years, I'd say, and joined the Pique at the beginning around 1995. I think it was around 1995 when I started working part-time for them, and mostly covered the Olympics. So the lead up to the Olympics and the Olympics.
Wonderful. Brandon, do you want to jump in next?
Sure. I am a staff reporter and features editor. And I have been, God, I have to do the math too. I have been in Whistler 9 years, been at Pique about 8 of those years, and previously was at the Whistler Question, RIP, long live the Whistler Question. And yeah, I'm so glad to be here tonight.
Awesome. I'm just going in the order that I see you. So Alyssa, how about you go next?
So Brandon and I actually arrived in Whistler a month apart. So it's also been 9 years. I came to work at Pique, and then we ended up flip-flopping, I guess. I was the editor at The Question for a time, and now I'm back at Pique.
Awesome. And Braden.
Sure. Yeah, I'm senior reporter. I moved out here in 2014 for the job and took over the council beat in late 2015. And yeah, I've been at the council table there ever since.
Amazing. And last but not least, Megan.
So I came to Whistler about 5 years ago now to work as a reporter with The Question. And when that folded, I kind of stepped into the role of social media lead. And I also do some news reporting as well for Pique ever since. I'm only part-time, so I'm there 3 days a week, but try to fit it all in.
Very nice. Okay, well, great to meet everybody. Now, before we dive into our questions, I forgot an important piece of housekeeping, which is, of course, questions. We're hoping that you folks out in the internet will have some great thoughtful questions for our panel tonight. If you are here with us on Zoom, you have 2 options. You can use the Q&A function and submit a question that way. Please do note that those questions are not anonymous, so your name will be affiliated with your question. If you, for some reason, want to ask an anonymous question, you can use the chat function and send it to me privately. If you're over on Facebook, you can leave a comment, and I am keeping an eye on the comment section, so we will get to your questions after our discussion. That's true for everyone, so you can submit them at any time, but we will address the questions at the very end of this discussion. And one final note, if you have a question for a specific speaker tonight, you're welcome to say, this question is following up on something that Claire said, or that Braden said, or what have you. So do feel free to address your question at a specific speaker tonight. Okay, that's officially housekeeping done. So the first topic I have on my list is kind of a broad one, and it's the idea, I mean, this is a whole opening a can of worms, but the idea of being media literate and what that might mean about how you choose your news sources, how you decide if the Pique, for example, is a reputable news source. Does anybody want to speak to that concept?
I'll start the conversation. I think this is an incredibly important thing for people to understand. And especially as we've been dealing with a pandemic, understanding where you get your news will inform all of your decisions about important information. So I quite often get text messages from people, and even in my own friend circle, and they'll quote some ridiculous piece of information that they've read. And the first thing I say to them is, well, where did you read that? Was it a trusted source? You know, was it the New York Times? Was it the Pique? Was it the Globe and Mail? And if you're not reading your news from a trusted source, then it's not, you can't trust it. It's not necessarily real. And it's very important for people to check the sources of their news. And I would absolutely say that Pique is a trusted news source. We all work very hard to produce informed, relevant journalism, and we don't publish rumors. We don't, you know, even if we're doing a quick web story, we don't base it necessarily on one source unless it's fully trusted. And it's incredibly important to understand where you're getting your news from. I'm sure everybody has something to say about this because it's part of our, especially dealing with social media, it's part of our everyday struggle is getting these crazy ideas from people that it's just, I don't know what they're thinking.
I loved your big 3 there, Claire. New York Times, the Pique, and the Globe and Mail.
Yeah. That's basically how we think of ourselves.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Not number 1, but not number 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody else want to jump in? Claire mentioned social media. Megan, do you want to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something I notice a lot when I'm kind of scrolling through the comments that people leave on our Facebook page and even on other news outlets' Facebook pages as well. You see people saying, well, I heard from a friend or I saw somewhere that there were, let's just throw this out there, at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember people commenting like, oh, I heard that there were 20 cases in Whistler, when we hadn't been able to get that confirmation from BCH or from the government or from anyone. And so I would respond back to those people and be like, where did you hear that one? We haven't been able to find that out. So share your sources with us. And they would say, oh, I don't know. I just saw it on Facebook, or I heard it from a friend of a friend. And that's where you kind of have to be careful about deciphering rumors versus facts, especially when they're all laid out on social media. They can look very similar, and it's very difficult to kind of tell what's real and what's fake when you have a truth and a rumor posted above and below each other in the same comment thread.
Well, and it was even more difficult at the outset of the pandemic because emotions were so high and there was so much information flying around everywhere and rumors, and things were changing really fast. So we're trying our best to stay on top of things and confirm things as they come in, before they go out, because there was just so much misinformation and things that might not necessarily be true. And I remember even going into the comments, as Megan said, and there would be people posting rumors, and I would be trying to talk to people and explain how we're doing our reporting job and why we report it this way, why we don't have that information. And people would accuse us of politicizing it, and people start to attack you a little bit when you're just trying to explain. So it's almost better to take a hands-off approach with social media, I find.
And that, I think that's the effect that social media has had, is that everything is immediate, everything is instant. And you see that with, I mean, it's changed news media generally, in the sense that, you know, oftentimes if you want to get a scoop or if you want to beat your competitor, I wouldn't say we're necessarily in this camp, but you will see news publications that just want to get the news out there. They haven't taken the time to verify or done that due diligence. And that's when you get into trouble, right? And just because information is out there or it's online doesn't mean that, you know, like we've been saying, doesn't mean that it's necessarily valid. And we have to do our, you know, kind of behind the scenes legwork in order to verify those things too. But yeah, the pandemic's been an interesting kind of test case, I think, in seeing this put to the test, for sure.
And just to jump in again quickly, something I found really interesting in working with social media news is that we're not necessarily a regulated profession in that you have to be a member of a board to be able to call yourself a news site or a news outlet. So you'll see pages posting information on Facebook, on Twitter, on just on the internet in general, and it'll have news in the title, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not some random person in a basement in a different province that's kind of posting as they feel like and calling it news.
And it becomes very, oh, sorry, you go ahead, Alyssa.
I was just going to say that was, I think the big thing we're missing to convey is what we have that some random person in a lab coat on YouTube telling us the vaccine's going to kill us doesn't have, is we're accountable. Like, we might not be accountable to a specific board, but like, we can get sued. We have a reputation to uphold. Like, we're accountable to our readers in a lot of ways that like some random blogger isn't. And I think the big thing we want to convey is just like, again, with like the COVID numbers, it was frustrating because VCH wouldn't give us anything and people wanted us to print numbers, but we cannot print anything unless it is verified, and everyone should know we're not printing anything unless it's verified by official sources.
Totally. And also I would add that we want to be accountable to ourselves. Like, we take our jobs really seriously, and we want to get accurate, important, timely information out to people. Like, people sometimes accuse us of leaving things out or things like that, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to that, Braden, and that's one of the things I've found very frustrating in general. It's been driven by the pandemic, but pre-existed the pandemic, but it certainly exacerbated it, is that when people don't get the information they want, they actually become very personal. And they'll be like, you know, the Pique is a bad newspaper. They use much worse language than that. But, you know, they personally attack the reporters and so on because they just don't seem to be able to grasp that we're not going to publish anything that has not been verified. It doesn't matter whether it's a vaccine story or, you know, a police incident in the village or, you know, anything. Every single story has to be properly, you know, come from a trusted source and be reported on. But people are so impatient that when you don't have something, you know, up in 5 minutes when they're trying to find out about it, they automatically assume that we're trying to mislead them. Instead of understanding that actually we're doing what we're supposed to do, which is write from a position of authority, contextually, you know, with informed information. And it's just, I can't tell you how frustrating it is. It's so frustrating.
And I imagine that that is further complicated when we are constantly getting new information about a subject like COVID-19, making yesterday's news inaccurate, not because you reported it inaccurately, but because just more information is now available.
It's changing. And you know, people have to understand that we rely on sources to tell us. So if it's about the, you know, if it's about the pandemic, we're talking to Vancouver Coastal Health, we're talking to, you know, to health authorities, we're talking to the government, we're talking to whomever we need to. But that doesn't mean they're talking to us. You know, for months and months and months, VCH would just say, well, Whistler's so small, we can't say anything because as soon as we say anything, everybody in town will know who has COVID, which is just ridiculous. That is a ridiculous argument. Oh. And it went on and on and on. So then, and then recently we got a few numbers that told us, you know, how many cases were in Whistler because they were so freaked out by the number that was actually happening. And now for the last 2 weeks, they won't tell us anymore. So, you know, it's not because we're not asking, like we're asking. It's not because, you know, we're not actually trying to get the information. We are. And it's not, that's not just true for the pandemic. That is true for everything. People phone us up with ideas and story ideas, and we're open to everything. You know, we come to work every day with an open mind. But if you can't get people to speak to you, and you can't find written records or, you know, title searches or police records or whatever you're doing, you can't just write a story saying, well, we got a tip about this, and so we're just going to print it. Like that's not how it works.
And I find sometimes people, like you were saying earlier, Claire, like sometimes people take it really personally if we're not covering an issue that they think is important, or we're not covering it the way that we want. And oftentimes, like, we rely on people, like, and this is something I think we're going to talk about, the challenge of reporting in the Whistler bubble, is that we countless times will get people coming to us with tips, you know, about something going on or some whatever, scandal, whatever. And then we're like, okay, well, will you go on the record? And and a lot of times people don't want to do it. And it's tough. I understand. It's tough in a small town. People have relationships to preserve and all these things. But I do think, like, if you really care about a particular issue and you want to see it covered, if you have that information at some point, like, you got to put your neck out there a little bit, you know. And people are, we live in a town where the image of the community is very carefully crafted. And nobody wants to say anything that is going to hurt or tarnish Whistler's glossy image with tourists. And that makes it tough sometimes to cover things that we know are happening, but we can't get people to talk about on the record.
I would add too, like, I mean, I totally get why people do that. And I would say it's definitely amplified in Whistler, but I wouldn't say it's just a small town thing anymore. I'd say with social media, it's kind of a major problem in journalism all over, is you're putting yourself out there when you go on the record as a source. And now you can have on the internet, you can have trolls coming after you, you can have campaigns, you could have people trying to cancel you. So you're putting your neck on there and you're putting your trust in us to tell your story properly, where some people, it's tough for them. I get it, because there's reputational issues when you put your name on the line, and there's privacy issues. So yeah, it's just, as Brandon said, it's something that we have to work with every day.
Let's just stay on this train of thought here, reporting in Whistler, because this is on our list anyways. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. I mean, we've already touched on the idea that it's a small town and relationships could be on the line. But are there any other sort of Whistler specific challenges to reporting? Maybe how does it compare to other small towns? If any of you have reported in other small towns, what do you think?
I'll start, and I'll say it's been an enormous learning curve for me because I came from reporting from Vancouver. And in Vancouver, when things happen, you report on them, and you don't, I mean, obviously you're careful and you are responsible, but you're not necessarily thinking about how every single person in Vancouver is going to react to the story. And in Whistler, that's what happens. And it's very, very challenging. But what we have to say to ourselves as a newspaper is that we are actually a newspaper. We're not a public relations machine for Whistler. I don't work for the chamber. One week, several years ago, I got a letter from somebody accusing me that I was actually a chamber mouthpiece because all I was doing was writing nice things about the chamber. And at the same time, I got a letter saying that I was damaging Whistler's reputation so much because of my editorials, I shouldn't have the job. And so there's these competing things all the time. And, we work as a newspaper. Our job is to tell the news, and we're not trying to be a public relations machine for anybody else. And it is super frustrating because, every time you run a story where it might cast Whistler into a negative light, like any crime story, or I remember, issues with writing about the youth using drugs and alcohol, which the numbers are no different than hundreds of other small towns and big cities. But if you report them, if we report them, it makes us look like Whistler is a terrible place where our poor youth are lying around drunk on the sidewalks all the time, and that we have a huge drug problem and this sort of thing. So when you work in a small town, but I think particularly Whistler, which is a tourist town with a reputation to protect, it puts reporting here at a much different standard than many other places. And you're called on it as a newspaper, you're called on it all the time.
I would say I worked in a few small towns, bigger cities. I've never had people get as mad at me for straightforward news stories as they do sometimes in Whistler for things that any other newspaper would absolutely report. And I'm going to have to be extremely vague here because I don't want to get into too many specifics. But in one example, let's say I wrote a story, a good hard news story that's important information for the community. They need to know this. And I was expecting comments to be like, wow, thank you for bringing this to our attention and things like that. Almost all of the first few comments were just shaming me. Shame on you, Pique. How dare you report this? And I was kind of blown away. I guess people like to shame us for different things that we report on, but it's tough. I still regret nothing about that story, but I still remember talking to Claire after it because that's one of the things that we see in Whistler that you might not see in other towns. People are really defensive about this place.
Yeah.
And it's not just the community reputation. It's because there are so many, I think I know this, the instance that you're talking about, Brady. There's so many personal relationships, right? So, and I think it's probably a good time to talk about a story that we can mention, a recent story, and maybe I'll leave that to Megan and Alyssa. But if oftentimes if you're writing about a person that in a small town people know and they have a reputation and they have relationships, and if you're writing, no matter if it's factual or not, if it goes against that person's kind of personal, emotional connection to this person and this specific person, then they're going to be upset. And I think people sometimes need to extricate their emotions from reading the news. I know it's tough, and I know that you read these headlines and you are bound to feel emotions, but I think oftentimes if you look at it from an objective lens, you'll see that we're just doing our job, and this is information that we are trying to share for the reader's benefit. But it's tough. It's tough in a small town when everyone knows each other and there's all kinds of those relationships.
We were talking about a good example of this recently with and I'm going to ask Megan and Alyssa to talk about this, to do with the sled dogs. So why don't you two explain that story and the shock we had about what happened with that?
Yeah. So I guess Megan sent us this video someone had captured of one of the sled dog, I don't know, what would you call it? Like
Operations, yeah.
kennels. And it was like a drone shot, and I think she'd pulled it from Reddit. And so I think she had an idea to come from somewhere reputable. But basically I saw this video and I was like, okay, well, like, I know I've lived here a long time. I know this is what sled dog kennels look like. I don't know if this is a story or not. And then we discovered, so the Vancouver Humane Society has picked this up and they're using it as part of their campaign to advocate for changes in the industry. And so we're like, okay, well, you know, I'll reach out to them. I should clarify, I'm doing a lot more news reporting now that it's COVID.
Yeah.
I was strictly arts before this. So reach out to the Vancouver Humane Society. And sure enough, they confirmed like nothing illegal is happening there. This is basically just an example of a dog sled kennel that, and you know, it was unfortunate. They could have picked any, I think, to kind of demonstrate what they're like. But basically,
let me interrupt because I think they specifically picked Whistler because it's Whistler,
maybe,
right? And again, it goes back to that whole Whistler tourism bubble thing.
Sure. So basically this video in the meanwhile is like making the rounds all over the place. Like Vancouver media had picked it up, and that sort of thing. So we're like, okay, we need to do a story on this. We can't look as if we're, you know, again, like trying to be that Whistler mouthpiece and not reporting on something that is out there. And so I was trying to be as balanced as possible, talking to the Vancouver Humane Society, and then reached out to the kennel and had like a very rational conversation with the owner. Like she made some great points and I tried really hard to ensure they came across. And I knew it was a sensitive topic. And actually, when I published it, I was like, I want to make sure her points come across so no one's attacking her was my concern, because I thought she had some really good rebuttals to it and defended herself really well. And so we published this story. I think we waited till the Saturday. We were waiting on photos or something. Like I wanted to be so fair because we were including the video. I wanted to be so fair that we included her photo of the dogs on the top. So it was balanced with the video and the photo. Like that's the extent we were going to. And so we published it, and it was just, you know, it was Saturday. So I went and did some things, and it was a thread of people attacking us and saying, how dare you? And it was, I think a lot of them were probably friends of hers, which, I mean, in a way, I guess that's kind of nice that her friends are been here. I think a lot of people didn't read the whole story. They read the headline and then commented and didn't actually take a look to see like, oh, she made some great points, like good for her. And so, yeah, it was just like a string of people telling us we're doing a horrible job and that we should do a story on how wonderful she is instead, which is like not what we do. And anyway, we had this great debate. Do we address why we did this story and talk a little bit about our reasoning and what we did to try to be balanced? Ultimately, we decided not to, because it can get really tricky to get in debates in Facebook comments with readers. And of course, we don't want to look like we're on the defense, but it was really frustrating. I really wanted to like explain why we did it and like use it as an opportunity for some media literacy and that sort of thing. But yeah, ultimately, I guess that kind of just died off, but we were really surprised by the reaction. I don't know if anyone
I think it's important to note too, like none of the Vancouver media, at least from what I saw initially, had reached out to the kennel owner. And like by us reaching out to her, and we are giving her a chance to defend herself. So people were seeing the story as, oh my God, we're attacking the kennel. If you just read the headline and we're looking at the video, but if you actually read the story, like she was given a platform to defend her operation and that no one else had given her. So that perspective didn't exist before we wrote that story. And I think that was what was missing from a lot of the lower mainland media. And yeah, it was just interesting seeing the reaction to it.
I'll add it, like, especially having reported on arts exclusively the last little while, it is hard to take your own emotions out of it. And people are telling you what a terrible reporter you are. after you put all this effort in, and it is hard to kind of remove yourself, but ultimately you kind of have to, and you have to be like, okay, I'm not taking this personally. I understand, like, you know, they're reacting emotionally, and it is a challenge though.
It gets easier.
It was crazy though. So, and we got like a bunch of messages sort of, you know, that came in through Facebook where they're not comments on the story, but they're messages to the Pique. And, you know, some of them were very, very rude. And my policy is whenever I get emails from readers or there's messages on there, we answer them unless, you know, there's a compelling reason not to, like we're not there. The only reason we don't answer them is because somebody actually hasn't seen it. And as soon as someone sees it, it's answered. And I answered all these people back, and without exception, by the time we'd had our dialogue back and forth, they were saying, thank you for explaining. I didn't understand that. I didn't finish reading the story. And then on Saturday, by halfway through Saturday, because I mean, there were, I don't know how many views or engagements there were on that story. Megan can probably tell us. But by halfway through Saturday, people were starting to say, well, did you read the story? Like, did you read the whole story? Because if you read to the end, you would see that fully half the story is the kennel owner telling what, you know, what she thinks, and that, you know, how her kennel runs and everything. And but the way people attacked the Pique was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking. We were heartbroken. I just felt like, oh my God, like, do people have just no idea what news is? How can they not understand? You know, it was terrible. I was so upset.
Megan, do you want to jump in with the social media perspective on this?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I remember. So for a little bit of context as well, we don't have any staff members that work on Saturdays. So the story was kind of posted, and then everyone else was doing either other jobs or off enjoying their days off. And then once Claire and I kind of noticed on Saturday night just how many comments that the story had kind of garnered, we started talking about how to address it. And I work on Sundays, so we were kind of trying to come up with a plan for that. And we discussed whether to put out a disclaimer almost about why we felt it was important to cover the story, why we approached the story the way we did. And the reason I think we ultimately decided not to was because we didn't feel that there was anything to defend. At the end of the day, it was a fair, balanced news story that deserved to be told, as everyone else here has already touched on. And I think people need to remember that we're all humans here. We all will make mistakes from time to time. We do everything in our power to avoid making those, and to do everything with our very best judgment. And when the time comes that we do make mistakes, we're all very willing to own up to it, very willing to take accountability for it and responsibility with our readers. But when we don't feel that we've made that mistake, we're not going to apologize. So I think in that case, it was better to just let the reporting speak for itself. And as Claire mentioned as well, something I always really enjoy seeing when I am moderating comments is people kind of checking each other. So whether it's someone commenting on that story and saying, hey, did you see the kennel owner's comments? I thought it was actually quite fair and balanced. And then that person replying, oh, I hadn't noticed. Thank you for pointing that out to me. or something else, when people kind of will check each other and keep each other accountable in the comments. I always think that's kind of a nice feeling to see people having really productive discussions in comments, which is not something that is seen often.
I mean, I think what Megan and Alyssa have said about deciding whether or not to justify the story, but, you know, publishing something additional, I feel like you would end up that would be a slippery slope, hey? And really, in the end, you're justifying journalism. And that brings us right back to media literacy and the idea that people do have to read beyond the headline, and people do have to read the entire article before commenting. Obviously, a lot of people choose not to. But
well, that's my big thing with media literacy is I feel like it goes hand in hand with political literacy, which is also something that people struggle with. And I mean, it's not like I blame them, because it actually takes a lot to really truly understand, I guess, how your community works and why your elected officials are making the decisions they are. You really have to get engaged, and you have to do a little bit of homework. But people have really busy lives, so not everyone has the time to actually dig into these things. But I don't know what the actual answer is, but I feel like there is kind of a gap there in terms of civil society, how things operate, and what people actually know and understand.
But that's why local journalism is so important, because, you know, it's all of the work that we do is important. But, you know, with Braden bringing up local government, most people actually get their news about what local government is doing from their local papers. You know, yes, Facebook, you know, local government has more social media engagement as well, and that is definitely making a difference. But still, they get it from their local papers. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important for community newspapers to have proper access to their political leaders and stories around local government. And, you know, I'm just going to address a bit of a thorny issue. This is no secret because we've written about it in editorials and I've certainly talked about it. But one of the things that Whistler decided to do many years ago was to only have the mayor speak to 99% of the information that comes out of Municipal Hall. And this was done as a way of controlling the message and protecting the community from looking bad in the media, and not just here. It's not, I don't really think it's as much about like local media as it is about Vancouver media and international media, because there is no escaping from the fact that Whistler lives under a microscope. And everything that happens here, you know, somebody else is watching. Like all the major newspapers and television stations read local papers and pay attention to what's going on here, and they'll come and pick up stories and so on. So there's this desire to control the message, which I understand, you know, as an opinion writer, as a columnist, I understand that, but it is very, very frustrating. And I think it leads to a lack of transparency. And as the editor of the paper, working with Braden covering local council, it is frustrating. And I would like to say that I feel the public would be better served if our local municipal government actually allowed us better access to people inside municipal government who can answer questions. A lot of the time, they're not thorny questions. We're not asking, you know, about scandals. We're asking about Parks and Rec budget, and you know, and what might be in store for the water park if it's redeveloped. And it sometimes can be a lot better to ask the person who's in charge of Parks and Rec than to have Mayor Crompton answer our questions, or for Festival Arts and Entertainment. Alyssa runs into the same thing, because how is one person expected to know all of that stuff? It's not reasonable. It is not reasonable.
I just want to jump in and say that, yeah, that is the policy, but I would say that this week I did have a media briefing with Director of Planning, GM of Resort Experience, Manager of Parks. There were some planners on the call, and it was all first thing Monday morning. So that is just right, exactly what I need, because I mean, that having that access to that expertise makes a huge difference in how I understand, how I'm interpreting what is coming forward for the public, and in turn, how I report it. So stories end up being much stronger, or they have way more depth to them when I have access to people who have lived and breathed these files for so long. And I mean, I do appreciate it that it takes staff time, and that maybe we can't just pick up the phone and call them, that is absolutely on my reporter's wish list, is to be able to just get the information with a phone call. But I strongly believe, as Claire said, that limiting our access to that kind of expertise does a real disservice to the community.
I'll jump in and say that I have broken this rule a lot of times by speaking to Alyssa. Whoops, and Brid. Yes. But I think it's a great innocuous example of why would Alyssa talk to Jack, who is on the call? Hi, Jack. Why would Alyssa talk to Jack about book club the book club I run, or the choir that I direct? I've gotten the slaps on the wrist, you guys. It's cool. It's all right.
What a rebel.
I've stopped doing it. I mean, we're on the record. This is being recorded. I totally agree with you folks on that one. Maybe it's something that we'll see a change in. I mean, maybe the fact that Braden had that call is a sign of a change.
Well, they have done it in the past. They do it occasionally. It's just it's not the rule. Not actually, I'm not looking for a rule. Like, I'm not looking to get people boxed in or make a rule. But I just think that if we call up and we want to talk to somebody about, the summer music programming, I don't really understand what the big deal is about Alyssa speaking to whoever's in charge of the music programming with RMOW. I don't know why obviously the mayor does, works hard and tries to give us all the information, but he's just not necessarily going to give us the depth of information that Alyssa might need for an 800-word contextual story that's a good read.
And I think people should know too that it's unusual to have this policy in a community of this size. I think it's becoming, unfortunately, increasingly more normalized. But I mean, in the city of Vancouver, if I remember correctly, they instituted a similar policy, and you could only talk to elected officials. And then they got so much guff about it that they actually abandoned that policy. So in Vancouver, you can, as a reporter, can pick up the phone and call the director of finance or whatever, and actually have an interview. And it seems sometimes ludicrous that, in a town of 12,000 or 13,000, whatever it is, we can't do that.
For every paper I've ever worked for, every town I've been in, I've never had that issue with anyone. I agree. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, looking at the time, I do have a couple of other bits and pieces on my list, but namely, because it's 7:41, I'm wondering if we want to jump into talking about pandemic reporting. And the big kind of scary buzzwords that I have aligned with that topic are the rise of misinformation and conspiracies. That's some big scary stuff in the world of journalism. But I'm wondering if anybody wants to jump in and tell us a little bit about. I know we touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but if we want to dig into the differences, how different has the last year been for you? Challenges, etc.
I'll start by just bringing in one other point that will lead into that, and talking about media literacy is the importance for people to understand the difference between a news story or a news feature, or like an arts and culture story or a sports story, and a piece of opinion writing, right? They're totally different things. And I think there's a real lack of understanding about that in people's minds, and they get very confused about that. Letters to the editor, for instance, are opinion, and people are allowed to have varying opinions that appear in the letters to the editor. The letters are generally factually correct, because I do actually fact check them, but I don't change people's opinions. That's their opinion, they're allowed to have it. But that does go into the whole issue of conspiracy theories and misinformation and that sort of thing. And I would say, from Whistler's point of view, we've been somewhat fortunate that we haven't had any crazy conspiracies or anything come up around the pandemic here. But we do consistently fight this idea that we're not telling people the truth, and that we're hoarding the information, or we don't have the information, or we don't want to share it, and this sort of thing. So it's not as much, I feel, in Whistler about conspiracies as it is about people thinking that we're not telling the whole truth, that we're just controlled media that's talking about the vaccines, that's talking about the numbers, and we're not giving space to anti-vaxxers, and we're not giving space to a number of other people that think we should be wearing no masks and protesting in the street or whatever. And we don't operate like that. I'm not going to do a news story about the anti-vax movement or the validity of it. I'm not going to do that. But I have published letters from people who don't believe in vaccinations, and they have their own personal opinion about that. And I have written letters about that. And then I've been inundated with letters from people who are furious that we've published that letter. But it's an opinion, and the newspaper is allowed and in fact, I think should engender discussion about any number of issues. That's part of our job, is to get people talking. It's to make people interested in different subjects and make them go out and read some more and learn about it. But again, I'll ask Megan to talk about this, because social media has completely changed the landscape on this completely. I mean, what have you seen in the last year, Megan, about this? Social media has been crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's kind of a continuation of a trend that's been going on for a few years, where you kind of see people kind of rallying against what they're calling mainstream media and saying that, we're all kind of just trying to further the same narrative or the common narrative. And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, I go back sometimes to this really good quote that a prof of mine in university would tell us, that your job as journalists isn't to look at or write a story about weather and quote one source that says it's raining outside, and then quote another source that says, no, I don't think it's raining outside. Your job is to look out the window and see whether it's raining. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes when it comes to these issues like this, you can write a fair and balanced story without really mentioning those people that are kind of taunting the conspiracy theories that are out there. So it is tough when you see those comments on social media, but you do have to kind of brush them off. And I think it goes back to something I was mentioning earlier, where you do see people kind of checking each other and having productive conversations in the comments here and there, which is always great to see. I did notice a comment in the Q&A about someone mentioning, like, why do we even allow comments? Because it does get so toxic and so hard to read sometimes. And I totally feel where that person is coming from. I feel the same way often. But I think it is really important to allow people the kind of forum to have these really important conversations, and social media has made it easier to connect with readers and for readers to connect with each other than it's ever really been before. But you do see that once in a while, but people generally kind of, I would say the reasonable end of the argument generally wins out.
I wanted to say there is kind of this sense, and I don't know if it's the Trump effect or what, but there's this, people have this sense of what the media is. And some people like to lump us in with that. They kind of view us as like the New York Times or this mass media corporation that makes a bunch of money, and we have this agenda and things like that. And once you get to know us, and this is why this is such a great opportunity for us, is we're members of the community. We're just normal people who we care about this place, and we care about the people here. We want to tell your stories accurately. We're not some mass media machine that is kind of gets rolled up into that conspiracy thing too.
And I think you see that sometimes, like when sometimes people reach out with an angry email or comment, and then when we respond and we kind of explain where we're coming from, I find often people are surprised that there's like a human on the other end of it. And they just think, like, people have this image sometimes of, like Braden said, media as this one broad stroke, that it's all one thing. But there's good media, there's bad media, there's everything in between. And I think people need to kind of do a little bit of their own legwork to kind of determine what is reputable and what is not. And that, know that there is actually people on the other end of these bylines.
Brandon,
sorry.
I was just going to say, we lost you a little bit there. Do you have a microphone that you might be
wild.
hitting? Okay, just watch the microphone.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I think Claire was going to.
I was just going to say that I get lots of emails every week. I get emails every day, a few every day, from people commenting on stories or letters to the editor or the opinion columns. And a lot of them are very aggressive and start out kind of rude. And then I answer those pretty well almost immediately. Like, as soon as an email comes in, I answer it right away. And 90% of the people by the end of the email conversation are like, wow, I didn't even think you would answer me to begin with. They never thought they'd even get a reply. And they didn't think I would listen to them, and I would say, oh, no, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. One instance of that is we had a letter to the editor by a lovely couple who had lost their dog, had died, and they had described it in the letter as a Mount Currie mutt, and which and this was a learning experience for myself, certainly, I think all of us, we hadn't really thought much about it. I'm not a dog owner. I'm a crazy cat lady. So I hadn't thought much about it, but I just thought that was fine. You know, it was a dog from Mount Currie. I didn't really see what the difference was. If someone had called it a Whistler mutt, I wouldn't have thought about it either. But I wasn't really aware of the enormous baggage that is attached to dogs from Mount Currie. And I got a whole stream of emails from people who live in Mount Currie who told me things like, it's not uncommon for people to drive through Mount Currie and actually take people's dogs and take them to a pound because they think that they're not owned. And then the dog owner goes and has to go and find the dog and bring it back, and this sort of thing, which is, you know, something I'd like to pursue as a story. But again, you know, it's a question of trying to find people to speak to us. But lots of learning there. But the people that wrote the emails and letters to me actually couldn't believe that I even emailed them back. And by the time I said, well, I didn't even know this was an issue. Like nobody's ever raised this with the Pique. Nobody's brought it to our attention. Like, why don't we educate people and do a story and tell people not to just go out and pick up dogs that they see walking around because they think that they don't have a home when they do. And I've had lots of letters where there's this learning that goes on, and then you get to the end of the stream and people think, okay, there's actually real people that live in our community who care, that are actually will answer my emails. It's not just somebody sitting in a desk, you know, or in an ivory tower deciding, you know, that they know everything and that's the story that they're going to publish, because that's not how we work. We've never worked that way.
You know, the library team has a list of very wholesome team agreements, and one of them is turn conflict into curiosity. And it sounds like you folks are doing that every day, whether it's answering social media questions or answering those emails, broaching those conversations with curiosity rather than defensiveness seems to, I mean, for us, we have definitely found it leads to more positive outcomes. It sounds like it's working for you as well.
I mean, like, I feel like in particular, the issue around race, like, look at us, right? Like, we have a lot we can learn on that issue. And I think we have made an effort, and it'd be great to get some more diversity in the newsroom, obviously, which is something we've talked a lot about. But I feel like there's been a lot of learning in the last few years around race and how to cover it and what to do and what not to. We're definitely still learning, and it would be terrible if we did something wrong and didn't admit to it and learn and try to do better.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm wondering if here's a non-news person trying to use jargon. Is the news cycle, has it changed over the past year in terms of the like half-life of the information you post? Have you been working like more around the clock, so to speak, to report in the past year? Anybody want to comment on that?
Yes.
Do we look like we've been off on the weekend?
You look fresh.
And we've had any holidays?
More immediate, for sure. There's more of a focus on the website and getting stuff out there. I think the news cycle itself after the first couple months of the pandemic last year did slow down, but there was definitely a sense of when this first kicked off that all of a sudden we weren't a weekly anymore. We're just an online news source.
Yeah. I mean, it basically became a 7-day-a-week newspaper, and it was all day, every day, nonstop. And I'd say it was 6 months before that slowed down. And then, and it was very difficult because just like every business in town and every newspaper across Canada and the world, we were heavily impacted by people not advertising. And so, our page counts went down. So even though we had this enormous pressure and we were working online like a daily newspaper, our papers were smaller. And then, we had to, we all took pay cuts at Glacier. Everybody had to take a pay cut. We all had staff layoffs, and we're still not whole. And I don't think any of us have ever worked harder than we've done in the last year and a half, because we really, really care. We take our job extremely seriously, and we want to keep the community informed. And it really matters to us. And so that's why we work so hard. We could have just not worked hard. We could have just, had the weekends off and not published every day and not worked 24 hours a day. Sure, we could have done that, but that's not what we did, So yeah, I think it's been a hard year on everybody. I think we're all really exhausted and stressed. It's an enormous amount of stress in the job. Like I'm constantly texting and emailing everybody saying, can you do this story? Can you do the story now? I found something else out. Can you phone this person? Now, can you do this story? I know you have those other 2 stories, but drop those stories and now you have to do this story. That's what it's like every single day. And in between all of that, we still have to produce a paper, which is a cover feature every week that somebody has to write. It's art stories, it's sports stories, and it's the news on top of running a daily newspaper online. Like that is a heck of a lot of work for everybody. And I'm very grateful for the team that I have. I couldn't do it without such professional and outstanding writers. I couldn't do it.
Well, we're very grateful to you. I guess I probably shouldn't ask you about work-life balance as a journalist.
There's no work-life balance. No.
Okay, we will.
Although I would like to point out Alyssa's having a baby. So that'll be fun for her. She's going to go right into motherhood and it won't even make any difference because she's already working 24/7.
You're going to be a natural, Alyssa.
Yeah.
I will say though, at the beginning of the pandemic, I feel like we all had quite a bit of energy. And I mean, as awful and as scary as it was still like kind of the story of a lifetime, right? Like I remember it was probably about a year ago when the mountain closed, there were the first cases in Pemberton and I was the only one working that Saturday. And it was insane. It was like the craziest news day of my life, having worked at dailies in cities. Like it was wild, but you had so much energy at that time because everything was like, it felt so important to get out and get out correctly. And it was huge. And then as it wore on, every story, all my art stories even contained like a COVID spin and it starts to wear on you. And it has been a challenge to like keep up that energy and urgency and try to come up with new angles for ways to cover things too.
And I feel like I'll just try to give an example that I think people that don't work in news can relate to. Like, when have we ever seen the government give daily updates on a topic? Never. Like it's been weekly, maybe monthly, quarterly, but I can't personally think of an example in recent history where there has been a daily briefing every day on the same topic that is reported equally every day.
Well, that was the thing when it first kicked off, this was something that no living person had ever experienced. So there was this sense of excitement. And that day that the mountain closed, I wasn't even working that Saturday. And I walked to the village with my notebook and my recorder and started interviewing people.
Yeah, you did. I forgot about that.
Because I couldn't just sit there.
Yeah.
I had to contribute somehow. And there was, like Alyssa said, that energy kind of carried us through. But then, yeah, like those daily briefings, all of a sudden you're like, wow, we're still doing this. And now we're a year into it and we're still doing it.
Yep.
You're sort of part of history by reporting on this. I mean, not to I don't know, put too much mustard on it, but you are kind of part of history by reporting on it. Folks, it's almost 8:00. For those of you who are in the audience, we will be taking your questions in a moment, and you can comment on Facebook. You can pop your questions in the Q&A here on Zoom, or you can use the chat here on Zoom. But I'm wondering if we want to maybe go around the table again with some closing thoughts or take-home messages, best practices for Pique readers. Any closing thoughts, folks?
So I guess my closing thought would be that I'm very grateful for all the people that are tuning in, because I think it's great to share this kind of information and to remind them that, my door is always open. Well, I'm not actually in the office, so don't come to the office. But, you can call me, you can email me, you can text me. My personal phone is so public now. And then I will answer you. And our newsroom has an open mind. Like, we're open to doing all kinds of stories. And we want to reflect our community, and we're working hard to do that. So if you have ideas that you think would be important for our community to share, then let us know. And I'm just grateful that for the people that are interested in listening to us, and I hope they've learned something.
Thanks, Claire. If we're going to go in the same order, let's go to Brandon next.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already talked about it, and I think, you know, I think journalism is a dialogue. This isn't just us coming down from on high, telling you what the news is. I think it only works if, you know, we reflect the community that we report on, and I think in that sense, like, we have a responsibility, and readers have a bit of a responsibility as well, and that responsibility is, you know, do a bit of homework, you know, try and think critically, and that doesn't mean that we're always right. I'm not saying that at all. I think there's many things we can improve upon, but I think it has to be a dialogue, and a dialogue requires two parties, and I like Claire said, our door is always open, and we are open to any, you know, legitimate criticism that we have. We're always trying to be better, and we love this community. I think that's the thing to remember. Like, we are people behind these bylines that are sitting through 4-hour public hearings, so you don't have to, because we love this community, you know what I mean? And I think that's what I would like to leave people with.
Thank you for doing truly the Lord's work. Alyssa, how about you?
I guess I'll pick up on Brandon's thread. I just want to say, like, I feel like maybe we were airing some grievances almost tonight, but at the end of the day, like, Pique is so special. It's why we've all been here so long, because we look out there at what newspapers exist and what are hiring, and they're not as special as ours. We get to do, like, amazing features, report on an amazing community that we love and, like, feel part of, and like, yeah, just special all around. And I'm happy to still be here.
Awesome. And Braden.
Yeah, I mean, those are great points. I don't want to rehash it too much, but I would just add that I consider it an absolute honor to be able to be that guy who sits at the press table every council meeting and reports that news for people. And yeah, like Brandon said, we're not perfect. We can always improve, and we're always open to suggestions. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure entirely. And Megan, round us out.
Wow. No, but I think to kind of just, again, kind of touch on what everyone else has already said, is our favorite thing about this job and why we all do it is to connect with our neighbors and the other people in our community. So I think that's something that we would love to keep doing, like through things like this, through social media, through emails, however people want to reach us. We do love connecting with people, and whether that is to hold us accountable when people think that we can be doing something better, that's important too. So reach out to us with those things. And just as important, I think, is to remember that we are real people and we are working as hard as we can and doing our best, and to just have compassion for that when you can.
Amen. I have some warm fuzzies to share from Facebook. They're not questions, they are just beautiful comments. So the first says, sending love to the Pique. It is read cover to cover in our house, and getting the Pique on a Thursday morning is now the highlight of my father-in-law's week, ever since he can't go to Tapley's. So that's beautiful. Thank you for that comment. And there's another comment on Facebook saying, fantastic conversation. Great to have this perspective from behind the ink. Great work, Pique. So I concur. Folks, we have plenty of time for questions. So whether you're watching on Facebook or you're over here on Zoom, please feel free to ask questions. I know that all 5 of these people like to talk, so I'm sure that they could talk some more. So we'll give it a minute here. We have a thank you over here, and thanks to the library. Thank you very much. I will also say, if you're watching and you do want to see more events like this, I mean, hey, Pique, I would love to do this, you know, twice a year, who knows, quarterly, I don't know. I'd love to catch up. So if
years and years ago, I worked for CKNW Radio, and we used to have, I was a program producer there, and we used to invite the editor of the Vancouver Province and Vancouver Sun on there every month for an hour. And part of me couldn't wait for them to come in and talk and listen to them, and the other part of me just couldn't believe the phone calls, because it was open line. And they would just get roasted just roasted. It was like people saved up all month and took clippings of the paper and then just went at these two editors about what they were writing and publishing in the paper. And it was, the listening audience in those two shows was enormous. So I'm always happy to do an open line show and bring on your questions.
I mean, I don't want to put the horse before the cart. I don't think we're going to get roasted tonight.
What?
It could be
Roast
speaking
us.
too
This
soon.
This is your chance.
Here's where the
Come on.
questions just bomb in.
Yeah.
Anybody, we're here to answer your questions. I mean, there is a comment in the chat that we could examine a little bit closer. Somebody in the chat said, to be honest, that policy, talking about the RMOW communication policy, is not exclusive to the RMOW. I used to work in a hotel and we were always told to pass all press inquiries on to management, usually the GM. I mean, does anybody want to speak on how it's different with the local government?
Well, for one thing, it's a private corporation, so they are well within their rights to do that by all means. If they want to have that rule for their employees, go right ahead. But it's different with a government and a government operation. There has to be a little bit more accountability.
And I think when we were talking about it being a rare policy, I think we were referring to local governments. But I think that's the thing you're seeing now with governments is they are being treated more like corporations as opposed to accountable public institutions. And
Especially,
I think that's a huge thing in Whistler.
Yeah, and you look at the size of their budget and that's a good indication of why they're as protective as they are. There's a lot of moving pieces in there. And if the wrong message gets out, it can cause a lot of trouble for them. But in my opinion, I think they should trust the people that they pay a lot of money to do those jobs.
This loose cannon right here. Any other questions? Folks, you're really missing an opportunity here.
I would like to let people know about something else that's really changed. Ask Alyssa to talk about this. Is the real impact that COVID has had on the arts in town.
Yes.
And we all had to pivot. I hate that word. I can't believe I just said that. Yikes. But anyway, we all had to sort of change inside the newsroom what was going on when COVID happened, because we went to this really daily news format. And people couldn't silo anymore. Like we had to have everybody doing everything. And so Alyssa, who, was a news reporter actually before she decided to, follow her passion and become an arts editor, was thrust back into writing news. But the arts and sort of cultural piece of Whistler has been hugely impacted. And I wanted to explain to people, Alyssa can do this, why they're not seeing 5 or 6 stories anymore in the Pique like they used to, because the art and culture coverage and sport coverage is actually very important to Pique. They're pillars of our production. And when Bob and Kathy created the paper, they were guiding parts of what the paper was to contain. And I want to make people understand that, we didn't just, or I didn't just decide not to run arts and sports stories anymore, So maybe Alyssa, you can just talk a little bit about what it's been like for the last year with what's going on in art and culture scene.
Yeah, I guess again, it kind of goes back to at the beginning, there was a lot to report on, like, oh, how are musicians faring with all these venues closing down, and like there were lots of like interesting breaking angles. And then when that kind of started wearing away, there's a bit of a lull, and I think everyone was kind of suffering, and artists in the arts community were suffering and like kind of freaking out, like how are they going to continue doing what they do? And I think everything was on pause for a while, and there were not that many stories. It was I was like desperately trying to think outside the box, and did a profile series kind of Q&A for a while, and eventually, like, we're certainly nowhere near, like, I that was my sole job, was writing arts. Like I was doing 5 or 6 stories a week, and we're nowhere near back at that level. But it's been like amazing to watch the resilience of the arts community in a way, like just how musicians have found a way to perform, like with all the live streaming. Shout out to Arts Whistler too, because they've done like a really impressive job of still holding events safely. But it's a bummer. I do like, news is fun and everything, but I do long to get back to like having literally like 10 stories to pick from, to narrow down to 5 stories for a week. and just having lots of events. And I mean, another thing is like that's cool about covering arts in Whistler is you have fresh faces coming in seasonally, and that kind of has stopped. So it's a lot of like, not that I don't love the regular players in the scene, but it's like a lot of the same people over and over, and that's kind of missing as well. And yeah, just on a personal note, I sure miss going to shows and that sort of thing.
Well, I have to say, as a member of the arts community, I really love the reporting that you do, Alyssa. And you know, in normal times, it's always like a little moment of glee when you do reach out about a project that the choir is working on or something like that, knowing that it's going to get some more notice because you're going to help us pump it up a little bit. And Claire, I love that you said both arts and sports are important to the Pique, because I'm not a sports person, but I am an arts person, and I love to be seen in my community. We actually do have a question here on Zoom. So, and it's for everybody. It's not addressed to anybody in particular. It says, how do you get a newspaper interested in a topic that your employer won't let you talk about? And then sort of a second part, rather, what interests a newspaper when it comes to employer relations?
That sounds juicy.
Yeah, I think anytime somebody says to me, I want to tell you a story, but I'm not allowed to tell you, yeah, I want to hear what that story is. I mean, honestly. I don't know that you have to worry about whether or not we find it interesting. If somebody is having an experience or has come across something that they're interested in, the fact that they found it interesting, or that they're, you know, they've gone through a situation and they've learned something, and they think, well, maybe somebody else would like to know this, because boy, I sure had a hard time figuring this out, and now I have. Those kinds of things, they're probably interesting to me and to the team and to other readers as well. So it's better to just reach us, any of us, you know, our emails are all in the newspaper and online. So reach out to us and say, this is my situation, you know, what should we do? But this does lead to one more interesting point, which Brandon sort of touched on earlier, is that we do get calls from people frequently who want us to do stories about things, but then they don't want us to talk to anybody that is related to the story, and they don't want anybody related to the story to know that they talk to us. And you know, you just have to put your thinking cap on for a minute to understand how difficult that would be. It's very, very difficult to do a story if you don't have real people in it, because that can't be a story. I mean, you might be able to write a column on it if it, you know, if the background is there, but in order to do a news story, it has to have real people in it, because the stories are not about what we think. When, you know, when Braden or Brandon or Lissa or Megan write a story, they don't say, you know, I woke up this morning and I decided to do a story about this, and this is what I think. Like, they're not in the story, you know, that they need people in the story. So that's the only thing I would say. Like, it's good to give us a ring about anything and talk to us and let us see. But in the end, if a story is going to happen, you're going to have real people in it. So if it's important to that person, they're going to have to stand up and be on the record about it.
Well,
Claire, I
well,
wonder-
having said that, there are instances where that's not the case. I do want to give people, I do want to let people know that there are two instances generally where we can grant anonymity to someone, and that's if they are in danger. If there's any sort of risk of harm, or they're at risk of losing their job. So that is a case. I don't know if that's what this person is talking about specifically, but if something is going on at your employer that you don't agree with, that you want to talk about, we can grant you anonymity if there is a danger of you losing that job. However, being a small town, being a, you know, we have a lot of small employers, even if you're anonymous, there is still a chance that your employer is going to figure out who went to the newspaper. So, I mean, we can grant you anonymity to a certain extent, but that doesn't guarantee that your employer is not going to put two and two together. But yeah,
and added to that, there's still a good chance that you may not be able to keep your anonymity, because we're not going to run a story based on one person's comment. we're going to have paperwork. We're going to have, you know, maybe other people who are involved in the same thing. Somebody eventually is going to have to be on the record, or there's going to have to be a paper trail. So, you know, that's the challenge. So we're totally open to the stories, and yes, we will protect our sources. Absolutely. I mean, we'll all go to jail for our sources without doubt. But, you know, you can't get a story in the paper if we can't legitimize the story. We've got to have proof, and we've got to have, you know, all the background that goes with any good reporting.
And it's probably good to point out, we have to go to your employer to respond to whatever allegation you give us. Like we absolutely have to go talk to them as well.
Yeah.
Which I don't think everyone always realizes.
This is so fascinating. I'm sure there are people out there who have maybe been sitting on sitting on stories, or sitting on nuggets of something interesting. Maybe you'll get something interesting out of this discussion. There are a couple more questions from our attendees. To one person said, I hope there's a recording of this for those who might be interested in tuning in later. There is, because we're live on Facebook. Facebook is recording automatically, and I will also upload to the library's YouTube page as well. I don't know if the Pique has a YouTube page. You guys could have it too. It's out there. It's going to be out in the world. So if you're here and you're really enjoying the talk and you want to share it with somebody who couldn't attend tonight, it will be out in the world to do that. So thank you for asking. That person also says that you're all very good looking and well spoken.
That's our publisher. That's Sarah. So I don't know that. Yeah.
And then, I really love this question. The next one along is, I assume COVID hid all kinds of interesting stories in 2020, 2021. Do you have any ideas of stories that happened that sort of flew under the radar that would have gotten a lot of attention in a normal year?
The first thing that comes to mind is Whistler's water system and corrosion in the water system, which kind of came out right before the pandemic hit, and then COVID just took everything and ate the entire news cycle, and we forgot about it. So that's something that I'm going to be looking into again for sure.
Not the sexiest topic, but
well, everybody drinks water every day.
Yes, so true. Amen. Yeah. Anybody else have something that sort of flew under the radar because of COVID?
I do remember the week before COVID kind of hit Whistler last year, there was a really, really sad story that we reported on about a local that unfortunately passed away after an altercation with police in a restaurant.
Right. Yes.
And in any other news cycle year, that would have been like the biggest story of all time. Like, that doesn't happen too frequently, thankfully. But again, that was something that obviously people really cared about when it was first published, and then kind of immediately it did get overtaken by the pandemic, and we did follow up with it. But again, I think obviously a pandemic that impacts everyone's day-to-day is going to
and just so people know, that incident is still under investigation by the civilian police watchdog. So I mean, I do expect that there will be more news about that particular incident, which was a police involved death. But yeah, stay tuned on that.
Wow. Yeah, you know, Megan, as I hadn't thought about that until you just mentioned it, but of course that would have been a huge story. Wow.
We should also, you know, this might be a good opportunity to let people know that in the last several months, one of the things that's happened with our local police detachment is it is just slated, it or described as a French and English RCMP office. And so one of the fallouts of this being more rigidly adhered to is the fact that every single press release that comes out of the Whistler detachment now has to be translated into French before it's released. And so, you know, for years and years and years, there's been a very robust coverage of the RCMP. And, you know, we always had the weekly briefs in the paper and so on. And Brandon's been covering the you know, the police blotter, as they say, for a long time. And they might have noticed there's been a little bit of a hiccup with our police coverage. And that's one of the main reasons why. So the police are working very hard to deal with this, but they have the various people that are in charge have a lot of stuff going on right now, and they've got changes in personnel, and we're getting a new communications person in Whistler's just come online and been trained. And so, but there's been this kind of hiccup. So it might be interesting for people to realize that that's part of the reason why we're now in this place where everything has to be translated into French as well.
Which takes days. Like you'd think that would be instant, but it's not. It takes sometimes 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
For some reason. It's just the bureaucracy at the RCMP. So I mean, we're getting news from the police that is like sometimes a week or two old, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Claire. That's fascinating. Good to know. Alyssa, we have kind of a pitch for an arts feature, which is somebody asked or comments, Alyssa, I'd love to read a story with interviews with local musicians 1 year later.
Mm-hmm.
And this person says he just recently read Monty Biggins' post on Facebook where he gave a brief description of how he fared, what he learned, what other artists could learn from him, et cetera, et cetera. Have you thought about doing something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've done kind of sporadic check-ins.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how different their lives would be now compared to the last time I did one, but certainly like in the near future, that's a good idea. I hope with vaccinations, they're coming out the other end soon and like are optimistic about getting back on the stage. But yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. We also have an interesting question here on Zoom asking if you could predict the next big story for 2021, what would it be? Any thoughts?
Northlands. It's all going to be about Northlands for the next 2 years.
Yeah. I think the other one will be continuing to cover COVID. And I think it'll be the fact that there'll be a third wave due to variants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like doom and gloom now, but we're going to get vaccinated. But in fact, we're all still going to get sick. I think the death rates will be much lower, but you're not going to avoid it. Like it's just coming at you.
Classic reporter failure.
I think it'll be more about like we're gonna have a long period about things getting back to another new normal and kind of like post-COVID. I'm not as doom and gloom as Claire, I guess, but I think there'll be a lot of like our angles on all our stories will be kind of like how people are recovering. It'll probably be continuing covering.
Well, and probably about over tourism. I think we're going to be completely slammed.
Yeah.
We're going to be back to, the constant social media comments of traffic and pictures of cars going on forever and no parking and no room at the parks. And
well, that's a big for sure, because we keep hearing about this pent up demand, but it's also in real estate too, because the Whistler's real estate market is kind of going off right now. And I've heard from realtors that there's also this pent up demand from internationals because right now they can't get here to buy. So once borders open up, we might see something drastic happen with the real estate market.
And Braden,
maybe it'll be a removal of the bed cap. Shall I dare bring that up as a conversation?
Let's float that, yeah.
I was going to say, Braden, you mentioned Northlands, but for people who don't know what that is, what are you referring to there?
Well, if you pick up this week's Pique, you can read all about it.
Great plug.
That big open empty parking lot basically that is where the tennis courts are north of Lorimer. The landowners BD Living are finally coming forward to rezone this land, and it's actually a really exciting opportunity for Whistler because they want to engage the community. They want to build something that works for our needs and that everyone has an input in. So that's going to be a really lengthy and in-depth process. And I don't know, I'm personally really excited to cover it. And I think there's going to be a lot of news stories to write about it here in the next couple of years.
I'm sure all of our children will enjoy whatever's built there.
Well, maybe there'll be a water park. Is the water park idea going to come back?
There's going to be a gun range.
Gun range.
Water slide.
Ooh. Okay, switching gears, this there's another question on Zoom, and it relates to sort of what we talked about earlier about how during the early days of COVID, you were both a print newspaper and a daily online paper. This person is asking, is it true that local print media is dying? And how will you stop the Pique from finding the same fate?
Yeah, the Pique is never going to die. over my dead body, over my dead body.
Great.
It will always exist. It is a reality that online news is here to stay, and Pique will continue to do the excellent job online that it does in print, but print is very important. And newspapers are the record of what is happening. Online changes all the time, and you can't even find the stuff half the time. So print is important, and we have an amazing sales team who, because every newspaper is a business. So you have to have a sales team for advertising, and you have an editorial team. And also, for the record, at the Pique and at most newspapers, they are completely separate. And there's no, it's like church and state. There's no combination of sales and editorial. It does not exist at Pique. So we don't, we love each other, but we don't have anything to do with each other when it comes to what goes in the editorial section of the paper. So, but going back to, I've lost my train of thought, the paper staying alive. Yeah, Pique is very unique because Whistler is unique. Whistler, again, you're under that microscope. It's very popular. It's got a strong population base. It is a #1 tourist destination, and that actually protects us to some extent. And I think that we do such a good job, and we will continue to do such a good job that we're never going to disappear. Have we been affected by what's happened to print media all over the world? That's got nothing to do with COVID. Absolutely, we have. I mean, everybody knows that. Like, our circulation has gone down. It's not drastically down, but we do print fewer copies than we used to. Obviously, we have fewer ads running. I mean, the papers are smaller. You can't hide that. But are we still robust, and are we still relevant? Absolutely. Are we going to get bigger, and we're going to get better, and we're going to stay relevant, and Pique will always be here.
I would add that was kind of what I was referring to, I guess, about Pique being special too. Us reporters look around and we're like, where else could we go? Like, you don't see 100-page papers anywhere. Like, it is remarkable. Pre-COVID, we were 100+ pages. Like, you just don't see that with community news, I guess, in other places. And it just feels like there's a future to Pique, and I think that's what keeps us here too, because a lot of other papers, you don't have that feeling. You're like, what's going to happen? Am I going to get laid off?
As our friend on Facebook said, I know for myself, it's a ritual to get your physical copy of the Pique. Whether it's, I know maybe we're not reading them at the coffee shop anymore, perhaps, but it's a part of my weekly routine. It's a Thursday morning thing, right? I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there who feel that way. And I certainly was not reading my local paper in St. John's, I'm afraid. No shade on St. John's, but I was not a local news reader until I moved here. I will say that. I'm just looking through the comments here. I might have missed this one earlier. Somebody suggested getting a French-speaking intern, like a high schooler, to translate the RCMP.
Yeah, it's the government. They're not going to do
bureaucracy.
No, you're going to have 25 years of experience or something,
Alas. We also had somebody comment that the Northlands lot should be a local parking lot.
Oh, that'd be awesome, actually. I think, well, it is privately owned, so the developers are probably, they are hoping to work with the community, but they're going to be looking for a profit too. So that's probably
very expensive parking.
Somebody said, great to hear, Claire. Glad you're committed to the Pique survival.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this event needs to be rebranded as the Pique will never die.
Over my dead body.
There's a headline there, right?
But it is a unique publication, because we're not fully back up to what we were, but even coming out at 60, 62 pages, there are very few newspapers in Canada that are even that big. And we still have sports, we still have arts. We normally have travel. We have all our columnists. Our columnists are, we're trying to slowly get them back. And I'd just like to take a minute actually to give a huge shout out to our columnists, because most people wouldn't know this, but they all worked for no money for months and months and months because we couldn't afford to pay them. And they kept writing and kept sharing their points of view and their important words. And I just have no words for the kind of support that means. And again, that goes to how great Pique is as a newspaper, because I don't know any other newspapers where the columnist said, oh yeah, we'll keep working for nothing. I don't know any. So, but you know, it is that combination of being news and sort of magazine-y and having all the different voices and having travel, having crazy horoscopes. I mean, our horoscopes are crazy. You know, having Max on the back page, you know, he just a great, strong voice, and it is a unique publication, and that you know, we just don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose it. It's so great.
Amen to that. Max is in the audience tonight. Hi, Max.
Ah, hi, Max.
Well, folks, it is 8:30 on the nose. There is one more question in the chat, but I actually think it will be a perfect chance to pitch the museum's event one more time. Because you know I gotta do that. So this person is asking, what are your most memorable stories from Whistler's past and why? Now, I think that might be a question that will be addressed next Thursday, March 25th at 7 p.m. At the Whistler Museum's event, Journalism in Whistler. So to that person, anonymous attendee, I highly recommend that you visit whistlermuseum.org/events and register for that event. And I want to thank everybody who is in the audience on Facebook and here on Zoom for your great questions and your great engagement. Thank you so much to the Pique team for having this conversation. I know I had a lot of fun. I hope this has been
Thank you.
enjoyable for you too. And I think that will be it for tonight. And I am going to sign us off of Facebook. So let's all wave goodbye to Facebook.
Bye, Facebook.
Bye, Facebook.